It was a halftime show worthy of the Super Bowl when Florida A&M's legendary band, the Marching 100, took the field for a college football game last November. Just hours later, 26-year-old drum major Robert Champion lay dying in the band's bus, brutally beaten in an alleged hazing ritual.
Is he breathing?
I have no idea. I cannot tell you that.
Champion's senseless death sparked a national outcry over hazing. The same outcry as earlier last year after the hazing death of George Dadoun at Cornell, and in 2009 after the hazing death of Armand Partamian at Geneseo State. The same outcry that has come with chilling regularity every year for decades.
Since you've been covering this, not a year has gone by where someone hasn't died of hazing?
Since I've started covering it in '75, yes, there's been a death every particular year. Would I be very surprised if 2012 goes by without a death? Yes. Unfortunately,
Hank Newer's a professor at Franklin College in Indiana who spent the past 40 years documenting every hazing death in the United States.
What is hazing?
Well, hazing is anything that is required of a newcomer by veterans in a group that you have to go through that may be silly, demeaning, or dangerous.
And the record of dangerous, even deadly hazings stretches back more than a century.
The first verifiable incident, clearly, is 1873 at Cornell University. It's the death of Mortimer Leggett, who was the son of a Civil War general and hero.
For the next 100 years, more deaths followed sporadically. But about 30 years ago, Newer noticed a disturbing trend.
Alcohol is the big discussion group.
The one constant in 82% of hazing deaths, Newer found, was massive quantities of alcohol, part of a growing culture of binge drinking at colleges across America.
We're talking levels which would be approaching basically half of your blood system being filled with liquor. In the death of Chuck Stenzel, when I interviewed the pathologist and went to the room where he did his autopsy, he basically said his brain was swimming in alcohol.
Chuck Stenzel died at Alfred University in New York in 1978, and the community was so outraged they passed the state's first anti-hazing law, one of 44 states to do so. And yet, 30 years later, nothing much has changed.
Tell me about Carson. What was Carson like as a kid?
Carson was very funny. He was a very likable kid, had a lot of friends, was very outgoing, very outdoorsy.
Carson Starkey grew up in Austin, Texas. His parents, Julia and Scott, were thrilled when he decided to attend Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California.
Was he a kid who drank, who liked to party?
No.
Not at all.
Carson was very
Very health conscious.
very health conscious. He always made fun of us. You're eating too many chips.
What was your initial reaction when he told you he wanted to pledge a fraternity?
We were surprised.
And concerned. So Julia searched the school and the fraternity's websites for information. She found nothing alarming, no record of infractions, even though the fraternity, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, had been suspended the year before for underage drinking, among other things.
And I even mentioned to Scott, at least if he does something like this, he would have some people to take care of him and watch out for him since he doesn't know anyone out there. And I couldn't have been further more wrong.
Definitely an outsider looking in on that night would call it insane.
The fraternity called it Brown Bag Night. Nick Cox and Cole White were Carson's pledge brothers and were with him in this garage on December 1st, 2008. The boys were each given a box filled with alcohol.
I had like a 6-pack of Guinness and like a 5th of vodka.
I had like a 5th of cheap tequila.
There was too much alcohol.
Too much.
Too much alcohol, and yet they were told,
You guys have like an hour and a half to drink all this.
You're just drinking it because that's what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, kind of.
And that's totally the last thing I remember about Carson too, just taking it and doing kind of what he was told.
Very quickly, Carson was in trouble.
I've said many times that, I raised him for 18 years, and in 20 minutes he was unresponsive and on his way to dying.
I remember seeing like he was like drooling out of his mouth. And I've never seen that at all when it came to drinking. So that's when I thought like, you know, someone needs to take care of him. And that's the last I saw of him.
How did you find out?
That's kind of tough. Julia noticed on our caller ID that we'd had a missed call from the San Luis Obispo County Coroner's Office.
The Starkeys later learned that a group of guys started driving Carson to the hospital that night, but then turned around.
They brought him back inside, and there was a bare mattress on the floor, and they laid him on the mattress and left him there. They didn't realize the severity of his alcohol poisoning.
They didn't know the signs.
And they were afraid that they would get themselves and their fraternity in trouble.
911 emergency.
You can't tell if he's breathing. I can't even feel a pulse on him.
You can't tell if he's breathing?
18-year-old Carson Starkey died that night. The fraternity was banned from Cal Poly for 30 years, and 4 young men were convicted of criminal hazing and sent to jail for a maximum of 120 days.
I live in a hazing world of death.
Doug Fearberg was the Starkeys' attorney. He says throwing the perpetrators in jail sends the right message, but so far, legislation has done little to end the cycle of hazing.
18 and 19 and 20-year-olds have absolutely no idea of what the law may be on hazing when they're engaging in these types of activities. These are rituals that have gone on for years. They're just doing what was done to them before. It may help, but will it solve the problem? No.
One of the things that will solve the problem, Fearberg says, is accurate information. So the Starkeys sued the fraternity, forcing it to list violations on its website. And voluntarily, Cal Poly has done the same.
You have a parent that was seeking the truth, actively seeking the truth, about an organization that her son was seeking to join thousands of miles away, and she couldn't find out that information. Had it been disclosed, Carson wouldn't have joined. Carson would be alive.
You believe that?
Absolutely.
Knowing about infractions is crucial. Even more crucial, says Fearberg, preventing them in the first place by taking the alcohol out of fraternities altogether.
Alcohol, lack of mature management. Solve those 2 problems, you'll solve the hazing problem.
The Starkeys realize they may never be able to stop kids from drinking or hazing, but they hope they can stop them from dying. They're lobbying for amnesty laws for kids who call 911 about a drunk friend. And they're teaching students how to recognize the signs of alcohol poisoning through their program, Aware, Awake, Alive.
We need to stop hazing, but maybe a baby step there is to get them to stop treating alcohol like a toy and using it as a tool for hazing.
For the Starkeys, and for hazing expert Hank Newer, it's all about trying to save another family from the unthinkable.
That's the call that comes in the middle of the night, the visit to the emergency room when you know your son or daughter doesn't have a lot of time. I would like to imprint that on the memory banks of every parent in the country so that they would demand more of our colleges and of our students themselves. We can do better.